That is one way of phrasing it. Is because we are doing something that is not done in contemporary American politics. We are treating the American people with intelligence and with respect, and we are telling the truth. Now, as all of you know, within our own personal lives or within the political life of the nation, the truth is not always pleasant. But unless we face up to the realities of our nation and our own lives, it is impossible for us to go forward. We cannot sweep the major issues facing us under the rug and then think we are going to advance. Let me chat with you a little bit about some of the real issues which you may not see on the television, and that's another part of the problem. You have got to, what democracy is about, what thinking outside of the box and outside of the status quo, is you have got to go into your own hearts and your own minds, and you determine what the most important issues are. TV is not going to give it to you, and the front pages of the papers probably won't give it to you. You have got to make that decision. And let me start off about an issue that I feel passionately about. And I speak as the former chairman of the U.S. Senate Committee on Veterans Affairs, and I've talked to some great people. And I know that you have here in Kentucky a very proud military history, and let's thank all of the veterans. And the men and women in our armed forces. But I have talked to veterans going way back to World War II. And I have talked to brave and wonderful people who put their lives on the line to defend our way of life. And at the center of our way of life as Americans is the understanding that we are a proud democratic society. Now, democracy in its essence is not a complicated idea. What democracy is about is you have a vote, and you got to vote, and you got to vote, and you got to vote. One person, one vote. Democracy is not about super PACs and billionaires buying elections. And what we are increasingly seeing in the last number of years, especially as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And what that decision, as you know, was about, it said to the wealthiest people and the largest corporations in America, it said, well, you guys already own much of the economy. Now we're going to allow you to own the United States government. Together, we are going to overturn Citizens United. And together, we are going to create a nation in which we have not one of the lowest voter turnouts of any major country, but one of the highest voter turnouts. Now, voting is very important, but democracy goes beyond voting. Every person here is an extraordinarily powerful person if you use that power. So I would hope that everybody here rethinks the role that they can play in a democratic society. Now, it is not just overturning Citizens United. We have got to work overtime to end voter suppression than many Republican governors. We need to increase the participation of ordinary people in the political process. We need to make it easier for people to vote, not harder. And at the end of the day, we should join other countries in understanding that if somebody in this country is a citizen, is 18 years of age, you have the right to vote. End of discussion. But our fight is not just reforming a corrupt campaign finance system. Our fight is ending a rigged economy. What a rigged economy is about is the fact that today in America, the top 1/10 of 1%, not 1%, 1/10 of 1% now owns almost as much wealth as the bottom 90%. A rigged economy is where over the last 25 years there has been a massive transfer of wealth from the middle class to the very, very wealthiest people in this country. A rigged economy is when the 20 wealthiest people in this country own more wealth than the bottom 150 million Americans. A rigged economy is when one family, the wealthiest family in this country, the Walton family, owns more wealth than the bottom 40% of the American people. One family owns $149 billion in wealth. And you want to hear what's ironic about that? What's ironic about that is that the Walton family owns Walmart. Walmart, as you know, is the largest private sector employer in America. Walmart pays wages that are so low that many of their employees are forced to go on food stamps and Medicaid. And you know, and who pays taxes for those food stamps and Medicaid? You do. So you have this absurd irony, and this is the essence of a rigged economy where the working families of this country are subsidizing the workers of the company owned by the wealthiest family in America. The middle class of this country should not be subsidizing a family worth $149 billion. You know, I have heard a lot of Republican governors and senators talk about the need for welfare reform, getting people to stop ripping off the welfare system. Turns out that the largest beneficiary of welfare in America, getting billions of dollars from the taxpayers, is the Walton family. And I say to them, get off of welfare, pay your workers a living wage. A rigged economy is when I was in Indiana the other day meeting with workers who work for the Carrier Corporation. They make air conditioners and they make furnaces. And recently they got a notice. Somebody stood up at a meeting like this and said, oh, by the way, we're shutting down plants in Indiana. 2,100 workers are going out on the street because we're going to Mexico where we're paying people there $3 an hour. That's a rigged economy. And a rigged economy is when in Kentucky and in Vermont, Indiana, all over this country, corporations show their contempt for American workers, shut down factory after factory, and move abroad to find the cheapest possible labor on this planet they can. A A rigged economy is when large multinational corporations make billions of dollars a year in profit and in a given year stash their profits in the Cayman Islands and in other tax havens and end up not paying a nickel in federal taxes. A rigged economy is when today mom is out working 40 hours a week, dad's out working, the kids are all working, and yet families still do not have enough money to put bread on the table and to take care of their basic needs. A rigged economy is asking why 40 years ago, before the explosion of technology in the global economy, one breadwinner could work 40 hours a week, earn enough money to take care of the family, while today we need two breadwinners who earn less disposable income. I was at the Vatican a few weeks ago because I have a whole lot of respect for Pope Francis, and I attended a conference on the subject of how we create a moral economy. A moral economy. And that is an economy that works for the children, that works for the sick, that works for the elderly, that works for the poor, that works for the middle class, not just a handful of billionaires. And with your help, that is what we are going to create. This is the wealthiest country in the history of the world today, but nobody knows it because almost all of the new income and wealth is going to the 1%. Our job, and we can do it, is to create an economy that works for all of us, not just a handful on the top. Now, what do we do? How do we accomplish that goal? And it's not really very complicated. No. We work together is how we do it. All right. Start off, and again, what I am asking of you, and I'm begging you, think outside of the box, think outside of the status quo. Question number one. And to go forward, we've got to ask some important questions. Do we have any psychologists here? Okay, we got some. What psychologists will tell you is the most important years of a human being's development are 0 through 4, right? We all know that. That's when a human being, to a significant degree, develops emotionally, develops intellectually. And yet stop and think about the dysfunctional child care and pre-K system we have in America today. Ask yourself why. Why does it happen then in Vermont and in Kentucky? What a beautiful baby you have right there, yes. And that is what this campaign is about, that baby. So the question is, why is it that in Vermont and in Kentucky and all over this country, working families are searching frantically to find high-quality, affordable child care? Why? Why does that have to be? Why are we not, as a nation, creating the best child care pre-K system in the world? And that means bringing people into child care who are great teachers, who are well-paid, well-trained, and well-respected. We create jobs. We make sure that our kids have a great head start in life, we make sure that parents feel good when they leave their kids in the morning and they go out to work, and we create hundreds of thousands of decent paying jobs. That is a priority. And then we ask ourselves, well, what about working people? How are they doing? Well, here is the fact. The fact is that today, millions of workers are working longer hours for lower wages than used to be the case. Male and female workers are making hundreds of dollars a year less in inflation-adjusted for dollars than used to be the case. Which tells me that when you have a federal minimum wage of $7.25 an hour, what you got is a starvation wage which must be raised. Now again, this is not a radical idea. When somebody works 40 hours a week in America, that person should not be living in poverty. We've got to raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And what that will mean is that millions of men and women today who are struggling will have at least a minimum level of security and dignity. They will be able to take care of their families and not live in abject poverty. And I want to tell you a story about how real change comes about, because that is the theme of this entire campaign, having the guts to fight for real change. If we were here in this room 5 years ago, no time at all, and somebody jumps up and says, Bernie, you know, this $7.25 minimum wage is awful, and it's got to be raised to $15 an hour. Mark my words, the person next to her would have said, $15 an hour, you're out of your mind, that's too high. You want to double the minimum wage. Maybe $8, maybe $10, we can't make it to $15 an hour. But, do you know what happened? And this is how change takes place. Workers in the fast food industry, in McDonald's, Burger King, Wendy's, they went out on strike, and I was proud to walk the picket lines with them. They went out on strike, they stood up, and they fought back. And then you know what happened? 2-3 years ago in Seattle, Washington, they passed a $15 a minimum wage. And in Seattle, and in Los Angeles, and in San Francisco, and in Oregon, California, New York State. And now the idea of a $15 an hour minimum wage doesn't seem all that radical. And if I have anything to do with it as President of the United States, we're going to have $15 an hour in every state in this country. Now, when we talk about a rigged economy, we're talking not only about starvation wages that millions of Americans are working for, we're also talking about the fact that women in America are making 79 cents on the dollar. Well, you know what? Women don't want 79 cents on the dollar compared to men. They want the whole damn dollar. I know that every man here will stand with the women in the fight for pay equity. And by the way, By the way, when we talk about our economy and our needs, there is one country in the industrialized world that does not guarantee paid family and medical leave. You're living in that country. Think outside of the box, outside of the status quo. Ask yourself this: is it okay for a woman in Kentucky today or in Vermont who is a working class woman or a low-income woman who has a baby today, is it right that that woman should be forced to separate herself from that baby in a week or two to go back to work? Are you going to fight with me to make sure we end that? The United States has got to join every other major country and many poor countries who understand that a mom and a dad have the right to stay home with their newborn baby. And that is why we are going to pass 3 months paid family and medical leave. I was in Flint, Michigan a couple of months ago, and as you may have read, the president was just there, I think, yesterday. And what he was looking at and what I was looking at is an enormous and terrible American tragedy, and that is children in that city being poisoned with lead in the water that they drank. But it is not just Flint, Michigan. We have hundreds of communities all over this country, including communities in my own state, who are worried very much about the quality of the water that they are drinking. Right here as well? Yeah, okay. We have wastewater plants all over America that are inadequate and outdated. We used to have in America the #1 cutting-edge rail system in the world. That's no longer the case. Our levees and our dams and our airports need an enormous amount of work. Our roads and our bridges need work. We can create 13 million great jobs, from engineers to blue-collar labor to architects, rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure. And we can pay for that trillion-dollar investment by doing away with outrageous corporate loopholes. When we think about the economy, we have got to deal with an issue that is not a sexy issue. It's an issue media very rarely talks about, but it is a very important issue, and that is our disastrous trade policies. You are looking at a former congressman and a United States senator who opposed every one of these awful trade agreements. Since 2001, we have lost as a nation some 60,000 factories and millions of good-paying jobs, and a lot of that has to do with disastrous trade policies. Since the passage of NAFTA and permanent normal trade relations with China, Kentucky has lost over 44,000 manufacturing jobs. In 2014, Fruit of the Loom shut down its last manufacturing plant in Jamestown, Kentucky, throwing 600 workers out on the street and moving to Honduras and exploiting the people there. At its height, Fruit of the Loom employed over 11,000 workers here in Kentucky. But what we have seen is corporate greed saying, if I can make $5 more by shutting down a plant in Kentucky and moving to China or Honduras or Mexico, that is what I'll do. If elected president, we will change that corporate behavior. Corporate America has got to begin showing respect for their workers, not treating them with contempt. This campaign has been listening to the American people, not wealthy campaign contributors. We have been listening to young people. And one of the most gratifying aspects of this campaign is that when we began, many of the pundits and the political experts, their view was that young people were not interested in politics, not interested in government. They were too busy with their video games or whatever. Well, over the last year, it turns out those experts were not quite right. And what I'm very proud of is that in virtually every primary and caucus we have engaged in, including yesterday in Indiana, we won 2/3 of the people 45 years of age or younger. In other words, the ideas that we are talking about are the ideas for the future of America. And when I talk to young people, here is what I hear. Number one, young people ask me a very simple but poignant question. And that is, how does it happen that for the first time in the modern history of America, our younger generation, if we do not turn this around, will have a lower standard of living than their parents? Now, my dad came to this country at the age of 17 without a nickel in his pocket, and he never made any money. But he and my mom worked really hard so that my brother and I could do better than they financially. And that is what America is. That is the American dream. The American dream is parents working hard so their kids will have a better life than they did. And I will be damned if we are going to see that American dream die now. And the second point that young people are making to me is they say, Bernie, you know, our parents and our teachers and our community said, go out and get the best education that you can. It's good for your life, it's good for the community, it's good for the country. And that is exactly right. We need the best educated workforce in the world. And when you think outside of the box and outside of the status quo, what you automatically think is creating a nation in which all of our people can get the best education they can. I mean, that is kind of a no-brainer. Now, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, you graduated high school, you got a high school degree, the likelihood is you could go out and get yourself a pretty good middle-class job. But over the years, the economy has changed. Education has changed. Technology has changed. People today need more education than they used to. In many ways, a college degree today is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 40 years ago. And that is why I believe that when we talk about public education, free public education, it's not good enough to talk about first grade through 12th grade anymore. We have got, when we talk about public education, to understand that public colleges and universities should be tuition free. Do not allow anybody to tell you that that is a radical idea. It is not a radical idea. It is a very common sense idea that already exists in other countries around the world, in Germany, in Scandinavia, other countries. Those countries understand that it is in the best long-term interests of their economy that they invest in their young people. And here is what making public colleges and universities tuition-free also does. And this is very revolutionary. Right now, I grew up in a family, as I said, didn't have a lot of money. My parents never went to college. All over Kentucky, all over Vermont, you have families, low-income, working-class families, parents never went to college. Many of those children today, in the 4th grade and the 6th grade here in Kentucky, the idea of them thinking that they can go to college is as likely as them thinking they're going to go to the moon. It is outside of their world purview. They were born poor. They expect to live poor. They never in a million years think that they, children of low-income families, of working-class families, will be able to get a college education. What I want to see happen in this country, I want every teacher to know it, every parent to know it, every kid to know it, that if those boys and girls take school seriously, work hard, do well, regardless of the income of their families, they will get a college education. And there is another issue directly related to that, and that is we got millions of people in this country who are being crushed by high levels of student debt. Anybody here with student debt? Well, welcome to the crowd. There are millions of Americans in your shoes. And I have talked to people all over this country. Young doctor in Burlington, Vermont, $300,000 in debt. Dentist in Iowa, $400,000 in debt. Young man dropped out of college in Iowa, $60,000 in debt after 2 years. And that is why I believe that people with student debt today should be able to refinance their loans at the lowest interest rates they can find. Now, people say to me, well, you know, Bernie, you're Santa Claus, you're a nice guy. Giving out free tuition at public colleges and universities, you're going to substantially lower student debt. What else are you going to give away? All right. How are you going to pay for it, Bernie? Well, let me tell you how we're going to pay for it. And again, this requires thinking outside of the box. It requires having the guts to stand up to the billionaire class. 2008, 2009. The greed, the recklessness, and the illegal behavior of Wall Street nearly destroyed this economy. Millions of people in Kentucky, Vermont, and around this country lost their jobs, their homes, their life savings. And the folks on Wall Street, with their billions and billions of dollars, went crawling to Congress and they said, "Bail us out." And against my vote, Congress did bail out Wall Street. Well, I think today it is time to impose a tax on Wall Street speculation. Which will bring in more than enough money to pay for free public college and university, and will lower student debt. Now, this campaign is not just listening to young people. We're listening to disabled veterans and seniors. And I hope you all share with me the belief that a great nation is not judged by how many billionaires or nuclear weapons it has, but a great nation is judged by how it treats the weakest and most vulnerable amongst us. Today in Kentucky, in Vermont, and again all over this country, we got millions of seniors, disabled veterans, people with disabilities, trying to make it on $11,000, $12,000 a year Social Security. And you know what? You can't make it on $11,000 or $12,000 a year Social Security. Now, the Republicans, many of my Republican colleagues, their solution is to cut Social Security. Well, I've got some bad news for them. We're not going to cut Social Security. We're going to expand Social Security benefits. I am a member of the United States Committee on the Environment. Let me tell you what I think most of you know. I have talked to scientists throughout our country and throughout the world. Climate change is real. It is caused by human activity. It is already causing devastating harm to our country and around the world. In my view, we have a moral responsibility to leave this planet in a way that is healthy and habitable to future generations. And that means transforming our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy. Now, I understand that when you do that, when you make that transformation of our energy system, there will be workers who will be hurt. That is why in the climate change legislation that I've introduced, we have $41 billion to protect those workers in terms to protect the coal miners and the other workers, to make sure that they get the job training and the jobs and the education and the extended unemployment that they need. And we have billions in that bill to invest in those communities that have been impacted. We're not going to leave these workers high and dry. When we think outside of the box, and outside of the status quo, we ask ourselves a very simple question. Why is it that the United States of America is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all people as a right? So I have been attacked for saying this, so let me say it again so that there is no ambiguity. I believe that health care is a right of all people, not a privilege. And that is why I believe we have got to move forward to a Medicare for all single-payer program. Our campaign is listening to brothers and sisters in the Latino community. There are 11 million undocumented people in this country. They want, they need, and I believe we must pass comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. And if the Congress does not do its job, I will use the executive powers that the President has to make it happen. This campaign is listening to our brothers and sisters in the African American community. And they are asking me a very simple but important question. How does it happen that we can spend trillions of dollars on a war in Iraq we never should have gotten into, but somehow we don't have the money to rebuild the crumbling inner cities of America? Why do we continue to tolerate youth unemployment in inner cities of 40 or 50%, child poverty of 35%, people paying 50, 60% of their incomes in housing because there is no affordable housing? Together, we are going to change our national priorities and invest in those communities that need the help. This campaign is listening to a people whose pain is almost never heard, and that is the Native American community. I think all of you know that from before this country became a country, when the first settlers came here, the Native American people were lied to, they were cheated, and treaties they negotiated were broken. We owe the Native American people a debt that we can never fully repay. They have taught us lessons that are absolutely invaluable. Lessons like understanding that as human beings, we are part of nature. We must live with nature. We cannot continue destroying nature. Because if we continue destroying nature, we are ultimately destroying the human species. Now, I know that there is a lot of nervousness around this country that Donald Trump may become president. Ain't gonna happen. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen because every poll that I have seen in the last month or two, including one today, I think it was CNN, that had us 16 points ahead of Donald Trump. But it's not only true of national polls, it's true of state polls. State after state has us beating Trump by very large margins. But, you know, polls are polls, but what is more important, I think, is that Trump does not become president because the American people will never elect a candidate who insults people every single day in incredibly ugly ways. We are not, as a nation, we're not going to elect a president who insults Mexicans and Latinos, who insults Muslims, who insults women and veterans, who insults African Americans. And I hope that all of you remember, some people have forgotten, that before he was running for president, Trump was a leader in the so-called birther movement. Remember that? And what that birther movement was about was a very, very ugly and vicious effort to delegitimize the first African-American president we have ever had. But Trump will not become president above and beyond all of that because the American people understand a lesson that we have struggled with for decades, but I think we are making progress on, and that is the understanding that diversity is our strength. That we are a unique nation because we are black and white and Latino and Asian American and Native Americans. We are gay, we are straight. We are men, we are women. Some of us were born in this country, some of us immigrated to this country. But the American people understand that as Americans, when we come together, that always trumps tearing us apart. And the American people understand that we are a strong nation when my family is there for your family in your time of trouble, and your family is there for my family in our time of trouble. That as a people, we are prepared to support each other and help each other. And that togetherness always trumps selfishness. And perhaps most profoundly, the American people fully understand what the great religions of the world, whether it is Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Buddhism, whatever it may be, have always taught us. And that is that at the end of the day, love trumps hatred. This campaign is about transforming America. This campaign is about creating a political revolution. This campaign is about thinking big, not small. This campaign is about telling the billionaire class that they cannot have it all. On May 17th, there is going to be a very important Democratic primary here in Kentucky. And what I have learned throughout this campaign is we win elections, we win primaries and caucuses when voter turnout is high, and we don't do well when voter turnout is low. I would ask all of you, on May 17th, let us see Kentucky having the biggest turnout in its history. And let Kentucky help lead this nation into the political revolution. Thank you all.